So good to be with you, brother. Thank you so much for being here, and really excited for this conversation. You're someone who is so devoted to men's work, to supporting men to walk with integrity. Is there anything else, though, that you want us to know about you, about whether it be your work, yourself?
There's so much about me. I don't even know where to start, but that sounds like a perfect... I really like that we talked about men, we talked about accountability, and that you mentioned joy.
So what inspires you to keep going, to keep continuing on this path?
It's just a potent space. I mean, I'm energized by the potency, frankly, by the intensity. Oh, motivations that they'll tell me about that feel like, oh, yep, that reminds me of this other client, but there's never a dull moment. The white dude representative of the woke mob here to make them feel bad and have their talking to. It's really what most men assume coming in to working with me is what it's gonna be.
So tell us a little about what has shaped you, and what are the experiences that have made you who you are and prepared you to do the work that you're doing?
I grew up basically white. And that was my dominant narrative. And frankly, like a white American, I've always had a really deep connection. A big part of being a part of the American idiom is in self-sufficient capitalist success.
So good to be with you, brother. Thank you so much for being here, and really excited for this conversation. So I would love to just share a little bit about you and your work and your being. You're someone who is so devoted to men's work, to supporting men to walk with integrity, to helping people who are in a point of transformation to come out of that, whether it's they're getting called out, they've had a challenge with accountability, you're the person who's in that fire with them, which I love and respect, about you so much, because you're also so full of joy, and I think it's such a beautiful balance, someone who's in that intensity to just be such a ball of joy.
Totally.
So I really appreciate that about you. You're a good friend of mine. Y'all are gonna hear a lot about just how much I love this man. And there's also the work that you do. You help teach people about consent. You give workshops. You do all this amazing work with Evolve Men, right? And so you're really creating this space. I know I've heard you say that part of your mission is helping people have a new relationship to what being a man is, and making it something that people want to be proud of because they have so much integrity and they're doing it right? So, I so respect what you do. I'm so glad to have you. Is there anything else, though, that you want us to know about you, about whether it be your work, yourself, that you just want to share and introduce yourself?
There's so much about me. I don't even know where to start, but that sounds like a perfect... I really like that we talked about men, we talked about accountability, and that you mentioned joy. So many people in my life who have been advisors have impressed upon me the importance of cultivating a joy practice, given my lifelong commitment to being in the fire of the crud of the stuff that nobody wants to look at, of harm and shadow and shame. Joy. Yeah. Gotta have it.
Yeah. A little lightness helps us move heavy things.
Oof, so much.
I want to just ask you a little bit too, what is it that inspires you? I know it's not easy. There's probably calls that you get off of and you're just oh my God, I was just in the darkest dark. So what inspires you to keep going, to keep continuing on this path?
Totally. A big part of what inspires me is that it's such a profoundly rich and interesting space to occupy and to hold. And it's rarely talked about or done. So I have this privilege of waking up every day and getting to do something that feels like landscape mapping. That there isn't a huge discourse in this. This isn't part of a big part of the therapeutic discourse or the therapeutic edifice. It's also not a big part of the coaching world. Really digging into the depth of accountability and understanding repair and harm. I have called myself a coach in the past, but I'm much more a mix of a consultant, mentor, and restorative justice facilitator. And this space of sitting with people as they shed the all the vestiges of patriarchy or maybe white supremacy or whatever it is that's keeping them from being in right relationship with the people around them it's just a potent space. I mean, I'm energized by the potency, frankly, by the intensity. And I mean, there's a lot that keeps me in this space, but the potency and intensity is a big part of it.
You feel alive.
Oh yeah. People, there's no there's definitely patterns that emerge when I sit across from men. There's often repeated patterns of motivations that they'll tell me about that feel like, oh, yep, that reminds me of this other client. But there's never a dull moment. We are really in the intensity, and there's always this possibility of breakthrough. And I have come to understand my work as a liberatory practice, as a practice of supporting the liberation of men. And that's such a joy to walk. I know this sounds kind of pat or like basic, but like it really is just such a joy to be in that, and not just be like what a lot of men assume me to be, which is like a feminist wrist slap. Like the like white dude representative of the woke mob here to like make them feel bad and like have their talking to. Like, it's really what most men assume coming in to working with me is what it's going to be. And they're just like, all right, I did bad, and that's how a lot of us think about accountability, of like, right, I've messed up and now I have to be made to feel bad, be put in the dunce corner. Punished.
Yeah.
And
justice.
Punitive justice, for sure. And that's what everybody has coming in. And I don't truck with that, but they don't know that going in. So I get to effectively be this surprise, ideally, right, of a liberatory force that is allowing them to do their work, but also emerge like how proud, happy, joyful, giving leaders that they want to be, that the communities around them need them to be.
More healed.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is like doing accountability work is doing your healing work. That is.
So I'd love to hear a little bit about what's shaped you.
Mm-hmm.
I know your culture is a big part of who you are, your heritage, and you're also someone who has sought a lot of your own, you've been on your own journey, like seeking out the retreats and the work and the therapy. So tell us a little about like what has shaped you, and what are the experiences that have made you who you are and prepared you to do the work that you're doing?
I think a big part of my kind of story about myself is not, I deeply, deeply identify with my Judaism, both ethnically and religiously now, but growing up, that wasn't really as much of a thing. I grew up basically white. And that was my dominant narrative. And frankly, like a white American, I've always had a really deep connection to the United States of America. Both, it is very much represented hope and opportunity for both sides of my family, for my mother's and my father's side. And I have a deep, deep affection for many American things. I, for instance, love monster trucks. I love trucks in general. I love, that's just true. I actually love the orientation towards progress. I love the kind of dream of inclusivity and also evolution that the United States represents. And so I really do feel like I'm a product of the American idiom. I have never resonated with a narrative on the liberal left, which is, of course, I grew up in Berkeley and Cambridge and New York City, so I've definitely got inundated with the left, and I feel very much affiliated with that. And then I'll just say that a big part of being a part of the American idiom is in self-sufficient capitalist success. That's also very much a part of my lineage. I come from, at least on my mother's side, a family of very, very successful business people who have like made fortunes. And I really, really wanted, my whole life have wanted to excel in work. And boy, that has not been easy for me. I think I'm deeply, deeply shaped by a successive series of failures in which I, in part informed by the laziness and lack of discipline of having grown up with privilege, did not find or failed to find a path through the business world, in my case, the nonprofit business world, that allowed me to succeed. I was fired or let go often, and mostly it was because I was difficult to manage. I was outspoken and wore my heart on my sleeve and did not do like cover your ass type actions. I wanted to be deeply authentic and deeply connected. I cared too much and I was too intense, and often thought I knew better. And all this is not what you want to like rise in a corporate ladder, and not even in a nonprofit context. As a nonprofit work, I was a fundraiser, but I always knew that I wanted to be the person on stage, and I couldn't find like an avenue for that. So I think one of the kind of key moments in my life was right around 2016. I'd just gotten fired from my most recent job, and I needed to really reevaluate like everything about me. And I went to Southeast Asia and like checked myself into a fitness boot camp and got in touch with my body, and came back and met you and found coaching and found the San Francisco sex positive community, and all of a sudden like discovered myself like on a path in which I was allowed to be fully expressed, both as an independent business person, as an entrepreneur, and starting my own coaching practice. I didn't have to have a boss, and that was amazing for me. I saw the path towards making my own independent mark as well as making my own independent money. And in the communities in the Bay Area that I was discovering, I found a huge space of acceptance for a lot of the shadow parts of both my relational way of being as well as my sexuality. And then in coaching, I found a huge avenue for really facing a lot of the shadows. I remember a deep moment in coaching that informed my accountability work, where my coaching teacher, Maria, who you were also influenced by, held my feet to the fire for being 5 minutes late. This is the thing that she loved doing. And, just made me look at it, and made me look at all the ways that I was in that classroom manipulatively trying to wriggle out of accountability. Oh, it wasn't so clear that you said 5 minutes. Oh, it's only 5 minutes. Oh, but they were also 5 minutes. Like, I'm really, really showing me all the ways that I was wriggling out, that I was trying to get out of trouble. And this experience of getting out of trouble, of needing to be a good boy, right? It was so informed by my privileged background, etc. Just like in that moment, actually, I had a transformational moment, and I realized, oh, there's nothing to defend if I just say, yeah, I was out of integrity. I'm 5 minutes late. Like, no excuse, and just sit in it. And that was a huge moment. Two other big moments in my journey that I want to name. One is right around 2017, when I was becoming a coach. I was really discovering the San Francisco sex positive community, and Me Too was entering into the national discourse, and something in me really opened up. I mean, I've done harm in my relationships, not around like some big call out. I work with called out and canceled men. I have not experienced a big cancellation or a call out, although I have experienced what it is to really, really do harm and not hold it well. And have that harm be gendered, have that harm be relational. And yeah, all of my own past harms came up in me. And I wanted, and then there was this other piece of seeing that I was feeling this really deeply, and a lot of other men were feeling it really deeply in my communities. But I had sought refuge in the narrative that I was part of these liberal, elite, super enlightened, woke communities in which rape culture was something that we'd faced, something that we'd in some ways deeply overcome. And what was emerging from some of the more small-scale Me Too stories that were, not making public headlines, but were definitely circulating in the Facebook communities that I was deeply embedded in the Bay Area, as well as in previous professional communities, was that nope, actually, all of our communities, even these, and maybe even especially these super enlightened ones, are navigating deep, deep gendered sexual harm. That rape culture isn't just a thing for those bad corporate mainstream Republicans out there, but it's here, and it's actually our very feminism and our liberalism that's preventing us from seeing it. So I started holding these spaces for men in my apartment. And they're so on the nose. I remember actually some San Francisco Chronicle article mocked me for how on the nose this story, this title was. They were called "Men Confronting the Patriarchy." And you remember the reporter was like, who would ever go to this? Like, literally, like this dude reporter came and saw us at this convening of men's work leaders, and yeah, just mocked the whole idea of it. Anyway, people did come, a lot of men. And it was in those spaces in my apartment. I remember I made everybody chili. I didn't charge anybody anything. And I used a curriculum adapted from Standing Up for Racial Justice, for confronting patriarchy specifically, and invited men to do some truth-telling, to do some collective confessioning, honestly, to do some naming of fear, of I'm afraid of getting canceled for something I did like 10 years ago. I don't even recognize that man. Like, I'm so ashamed by how I was with women in college. I think the future is female, but I don't know what my place in it is. All these fears and sensitivities, and I was just so moved by that work. I didn't have a spiritual language for it at the time because I really hadn't had my spiritual awakening, but I felt very clearly that this was my path. And so I went from like general life coaching to very clearly going into work with men, and then very clearly going into work around the ownership of sexual harm. Yeah. So that was a big one. And then the second one was after I'd really dedicated myself to this path. I was 4 or 5 years in, and I was invited by a man I'd met actually at a Mankind Project retreat, Zvika Krieger, who had just taken over being a rabbi at a synagogue in the Bay Area, and he sent a group email saying, come check out my synagogue. I had never been moved to go to a synagogue. I've never gone to synagogue. I am not a bar mitzvah. I did not go to temple on the high holidays, which is kind of the minimum for most Jews, even like the non-Jew Jews. Didn't do that. My father was raised Orthodox and renounced it, renounced Judaism, and my mother was kind of a waspy Jew. She was Jewish stock, raised Presbyterian, basically. And I went to the synagogue and I started hearing the voices of people singing in Hebrew, and I started weeping. I felt my ancestors. I felt God for the first time. And this just kept on happening. I was like, oh, that must be like a one-time weird thing. I kept on coming back, and it kept on happening. And I started changing, really, really changing. I started examining my life and my lifestyle in really critical ways, especially the ways that I was relating to sexuality. I had already gotten completely sober from drugs and alcohol. And that wasn't like a big rock bottom thing. That was my sister-in-law actually saying, we want you to play with our children, your nephews, but we're a little worried that you smoke too much weed, that and this was right as California was legalizing everything. There was like weed everywhere. And I had been a habitual weed user for a long time, and I just gave it up. I was like, nope, this is not gonna be my story. Family's too important. And so I'd already been on that journey. But yeah, my relationship with God really helped me look at how I was in relationship to my spirituality and in my relationship to my body and my sexuality, and help me question some of the kind of more promiscuous tendencies that I'd been in. And it also just opened me up to a world of spiritual practice that had never, frankly, felt authentic to me. And it opened me up to a re-indigenization, an experience of, I actually can authentically access Judaism in a way that isn't informed by kind of my resentment pushback at a lot of elements of Jewish culture that I'd kind of just held at arm's length my whole life. It felt organic, it felt natural to embrace my Judaism. And so that was a huge moment. And that, frankly, is very much what led me on the path to being in this chair right now. Because if I hadn't, I don't think you would have welcomed me as a part of a spiritual innovation community, because I really wasn't orienting to my life from a spiritual place.
Man, thank you for sharing your story. And I actually want to click on one piece, because in our men's circle, a lot of men struggle with porn addiction, sex addiction, every kind of addiction, actually, like literally all of them, and most of them it's multiple. Mm-hmm. And I know that you're someone a lot of people in that circle look up to for the journey you've been on with sobriety, with celibacy, and you've gone through a big change, right? Like you were Mischa, the one who threw all the parties, like the one who like you were like the harbinger of the debauchery, you know. I mean, like, and then now you're like,
I'll own it.
I mean,
own it. That's true.
It's a chapter. I had a chapter that wasn't, you know, unfortunately not too different. So now you're someone who men look up to for your sobriety, for your discipline, for your like ability to not be a slave to those addictions. That's how I understand it. It's like I wasn't a slave. I'm free to do whatever I want, but I was a slave to my addictions. So I would just love to hear about like how has that changed? What has it meant for you? And like what do you see that doing for men who are like, oh, okay, yeah, I can do this stuff, but what is it actually? Where does that end up?
Yeah, and I love the question, and I just want to caveat by saying that like my journey does not necessarily need to be every man's journey, and I'll say that I think of my sexual explorations not in the context of as much of an overuse or an undisciplined use as I think about my use of marijuana. I think a lot of the ways that I was in a period of sexual exploration were actually very aligned for me at the time, that having a period of what I like to call sluttery, but also of, as you said, debauchery, of pushing the boundaries, not just of hedonism or abandon for its own sake, but of different ways of connecting with my sexuality, with exhibitionism, with collective experience, with the accessing of the erotic in collective. I think all of that's actually deeply, deeply potent energy. And I even push back on the idea of everything I was doing as parties. I was often facilitating conscious erotic experiences or specific explorations. I even created an organization during COVID for just virtual versions of these like erotic adventures. And I have heard story after story of liberation and healing emerging from these spaces, and I myself have experienced liberation and healing emerging from spaces that even ones that aren't maybe as conscious as they could be. So there's a lot of beauty and wisdom in there, and I am not at the place in my life where it's important to me to renounce any of it. And I did see that it was not aligned, and that it anymore, and that it was coming. A lot of my attendance at events was coming from a place of compulsion. That there was a degree to which I was still making up for my teenage insecure boy thing, even as I literally was coaching other men not to do that. So there was meta incoherence for me, especially, and I have also found that there are that for me, I really resonate with the transformative power of abstention. That I have a harder time with limits or with moderation. But that clear rules, especially, I mean, this is actually, there's a lot of discourse currently in the popular media about abundance and how abundance shifts us, right? 20 years ago, people were talking about the tyranny of choice, right? You go down a shopping mall aisle and there's too much choice. That's definitely applied to me, that creating boundaries and limits on my expression, on my on where I get my dopamine hits and on how easily I can get my dopamine hits is very, very good for me. And I won't say that that's necessarily good for anybody else, but for me, it is. There's a great Kabbalistic Jewish concept that I just want to invoke, which is chesed and gevura. Chesed is abounding, bountiful, boundless love, and gevura is limits. It's boundaries. And in Kabbalah, they're always presented together. They're always presented as two sides of a coin. That it's actually much more appropriate to have boundaries when you're expressing big love.
To not over.
Yeah, to not overpower, and you can even kind of assess yourself and assess your life or assess your communities as how deeply you're kind of leaning to one side or another, and what your relationship is with open-heartedness as well as what your relationship is with limits and boundaries. And yeah, so I try to think of these limits and boundaries as reflections of my own integrity, of my own journey, rather than objective standards that I want to impose on everybody. And not for nothing, but I think that that's what ends up resonating with men more. I don't think I would resonate as much as if I were preaching abstinence or if I was preaching celibacy. Frankly, this is just my own journey.
Something about the work that you do, the work that we do with men's work, is that there's a professional side and there's a very personal side, right? And so when it comes to rites of passage and initiation, I know you're someone who has facilitated rites of passage for me, for many men with Sacred Sons, and also you've experienced that, through Mankind Project. So I'd love to hear from you, what is the power and the importance of these initiations, these rites of passage for men? What power does it hold, and what could the world be like if men had this?
I love that question so much. I actually felt it. Whew, I felt it in my gut. Yeah. We need ritual. We need witnessing. We need to be given milestones and markers for our own growth and evolution, and we need to know that we are seen. Not just generally, but really seen by the collective. One of the most potent parts of rites of passage and initiations is being seen by the collective, especially by men that you respect. The energy of, you are now one of us. You are joining the ranks of the people who are not just respected, but who are charged with a deep responsibility. There are men's work leaders out there who believe that the project is to somehow dismantle patriarchy to the point where we won't need men's work. And I do not think that that's true. I think that we will always need men's work, because we will always, and I think this is actually a beautiful thing. I don't think that that's a tragedy. I think we will always need a way of acknowledging and recognizing the responsibility that comes with power. And to me, this is the essence. Not just, we need a place for men to cry together, but being in a place where we acknowledging the power and responsibility that we have as men in this world, in our communities, in our families, that. And I know of no better way to do that than rites of passage, initiation, witnessing, and even commitments.
I love what you're saying, because we're always going to have boys, and boys are not going to just learn how to be accountable and how to be good men of integrity. That we're going to need to show them. If we didn't get that growing up, look how we turn out.
For sure. Yeah. And it I think a lot of thinkers have lamented the loss of these types of rituals. And a lot of people would point to the bar mitzvah ceremony, for instance, as a very established rite of passage. And yet, so much of a bar mitzvah is about book learning. It's about rote memorization. There's a real absence, and frankly, mostly bar mitzvahs, like bridal showers, or more to the point, like bachelor parties or fraternities, are robbed of their transformative ritualistic potential, and they just become an opportunity for spoiled kids to get a lot of gifts. I mean, this is such a waste, such a tragic waste of an opportunity. There is so much rich potential for something so much, and what we were doing for your initiation, if we could talk about that for a second, is replacing the bachelor party.
Yes.
Right? This wasn't just a random thing that we were doing. You're stepping into manhood, specifically into leadership, into fatherhood, and into husbandship. And we wanted to create an initiation ceremony that acknowledged those steps that you were taking in a way that we knew would really deeply resonate for you. And so we collectively created something that we knew would, and I say we because this was a collaboration. I maybe spearheaded it, but I was really deeply trying to tune into people who have known you for longer than I have, who have known you in different contexts.
Shout out J-Jo, shout out David.
Yeah, deep
shout
shout
out.
out.
My family, just want to give them.
That's right. Right, yeah, and we knew how important your family was, so we made sure to include some of the elders from your family. And that was one of the most touching moments for me, was that circle at the end where we allowed your uncles to share about their experience of being good husbands and good fathers. So deep. And that, like many good rituals, one of the deep things that I've learned from Sacred Sons and from Mankind Project is that, especially for men, a good ritual requires confrontation.
Yeah.
That if all we're doing is singing praises, and that can be beautiful and actually really wonderful, and it's not, but like, especially for initiation, there's so much about manhood.
Yeah.
We want to earn it. We want to earn it.
Exactly. Well, I want to give folks a little bit of a sense of like what we're talking about here, because this was the like top 3 most transformative experiences of my life, right? So I just want to name, like, one is a like Jewish white guy and an Asian dude and like a black guy, and like all these people come together for this Muslim to like create this rites of passage that was surprisingly so spiritually and culturally accurate for my needs. And I just want to name the importance of that, is that, like, 5 times a day, including at the crack of dawn, everyone stops what we're doing. I'm going to go pray my 5 prayers, and you're all like, we're going to pray with you. We're going to, like, some people are meditating, some people are doing yoga, but like we're holding this space of like, we're in this rhythm with you, right? And, we're like, okay, we're going to go to the shooting range, and it's like, protector energy. Like, what is that about, right? And then the conference, there was like all the fun and the magic and the workout, and I'm exhausted, and like, you're wearing me down, and then boom, after I'm so worn down, we're at the beach, the drums are going, all my like men from my men's circle who've seen me for years are around me, and they're like, and I'm like, I wonder what's gonna happen. In my head, I'm like, okay, we're the Bay Area community, they're gonna tell me how much they love me or something, and like, so we're each gonna tell you about your character flaws and the ways that we've seen you come up short, and the things that you need to improve upon if you're gonna be the father you wanna be, and the husband that you wanna be, and the leader that we need you to be. And I was just like, oh crap, okay, let's go. And I'm like, I'm ready, but I was like, okay, this is real. And it was, and you don't get to defend yourself. There's no talking back. It's just, you're gonna receive the feedback. You'll have some time to integrate, and they're gonna go again and go again and go again. And then you're putting on the gloves, and you're gonna fight someone, and it's gonna get, the message is beaten into you literally. So I just want everyone to understand. And then after that, there was the love and the singing of the praise, and you're carrying me, and I'm crying, and there's like, we love you so much. But like I said, I had to earn it, right? I had to earn that recognition, and it was so life-changing for me. And I'm a different person, right? I've had to go into every friendship and relationship in my life and like, hey, so I'm a new person now. Like these are things that I was doing that I'm not doing anymore. Like ways that I was not accountable for so I want, in your process of creating that, like being who you are, creating that for me, like what can other people who want to create these kinds of rites of passage and rituals, like what can they learn about designing that and like coming together with the community? Like what were the key ingredients?
Thank you. Oh, and I just felt that immediately. I think the collaboration with the most meaningful men in a man's life to really give a sense of what they know about him and what he would both resonate with, what he needs, and what he appreciates. And I mean, this is such like an area of abdication in male friendship. It's like we support our bros, but like we don't actually tell them often what they need to hear, what they need, like, dude, as your friend, you need to hear this hard shit. Yeah. Stuff. And like knowing you enough to know that would resonate with you, that you'd actually respect us more, respect yourself more for not just receiving love, for receiving hard love. Yeah. But that's personal, and that may not be what is right for everybody. The key elements of that ritual, and I think for any potent ritual, especially one of initiation, was first that we were really honoring the culture that you came from and finding ways to elevate it, to connect you even more deeply, and to also to your Muslim faith, but also to be non-Muslims in appreciation and witness of that. We knew that would be a potent piece to be pausing our day 5 times. The other piece was that not the entire weekend needed to be in this conscious ritual heavy space, but that there was a piece that really did, and that we had to insist on it. It was late, people were tired, and we're like, no, we're coming down. We're coming down to the water. And then even from there, everyone's joking around, right? That's what people do when they're uncomfortable or they don't know what's going on. They joke, they laugh, they giggle, whatever. Insisting on silence. We're gonna walk to the space in silence. Oh, okay. Insisting on the core elements, on the drum, on the burning of incense in an intentional way, on the welcoming of each person into the circle in an intentional way, on the establishment of the ritual space through prayer, through intention, saying we are now in this space, through the circling. There was also an element of what you just described where after each hard share, we gave you an opportunity to integrate, but also encouraged the somatic integration. So involving our bodies in ritual, encouraging you to shout, moving the circle, moving the energy. We're moving around you. And also attunement. That there was check-ins, that there was humanity and care and trauma informedness, right? We were making sure that we were not dysregulating you, that we were not taking you out of your comfort zone, that we were taking you out of your comfort zone, but not putting you in danger. Exactly. And that's so critical. It's very easy, and this does happen in edgy ritual spaces where people are pushed beyond where it was responsible to take them. I think also bookending it with love and appreciation, right? Before the hard stuff, reassuring you. After the hard stuff, loving on you. Let's. I mean, there's so many elements.
The last thing I just want to say too is like how it also didn't end with that initiation, right? Like there was, here's the notes, Maz, of like these are the things we shared with you. So in case you forget, like next men's circle, how are you feeling? Like I just wanted to appreciate too that you all, it was done by people who are on the journey with me, and so I wasn't just like left hanging. So I just wanted to also name that.
Totally. And ideally, especially with confrontational ones, one of the big beauties of being in the Sacred Sons community or in the Mankind Project community is that we are all like, no saints, no sinners, no like guru dynamics. We're all in this work, right? Like I am very much in this work. I have accountability work to do. I have shadow. I have blind spots. I have places that I need to grow. And being in a peer relationship, rather than saying exclusively like, we're doing this thing for you because you're the problem or you need it.
We're the elders. You're the,
I mean, with all the, and there is also space for respecting eldership and respecting. Absolutely.
So we've been talking about rites of passage, and that's how we get ready to be an active member of a community, a responsible member of a community, and community is a big part of what we do together. So I want to talk to you a little bit. You're someone who is a part of this community, Embrace. You're also someone who's been a part of, led, started, seen communities rise and fall. So from your experience, what do you think are the most important things that we need to be mindful of when we're building community, the ways that communities fall apart? And you've given us some really great advisory, as we were building this. So I'd just love to hear from your experience. What do we need to know when we're trying to build intentional, beloved community?
Well, right there, I mean, even setting the intention of making it intentional or making it beloved is itself already a lot of steps towards what makes something successful, is some level of intentionality and of a recognition of a recognition of the building of community, not just the creating of events. Again and again and again, what I've seen, and frankly, the communities that I have been a part of have been centered around either a shared activity. We all like partner dancing, right? We all like going to Burning Man. We or graduated from the same university, or maybe we all enjoy a specific kind of party, or we all attend a series of parties. Events as the collective sacrament, I have found inadequate. Activities or shared interests, I have found inadequate for really creating what I have resonated with as a beloved community. Values and vibes, and a collective sacrament that is a lot more sustainable than a big party, right? If what you need to be in community is continue to attend the glamorous events, I don't think that that's actually conducive to a nervous system regulated life. I have seen a lot of clients whose entire social network depends on continuing to show up at big, glamorous, expensive parties. That's not a community. That's a scene. And God bless. Orienting your entire social life and really your sense of community on parties doesn't actually really constitute community. It's a scene. And God bless. I have as I've said, loved parties. But the orientation that I've found in Embrace and I just, that just settled in my soul in a different way has been around a shared sacrament of intentional, slow, nervous system regulated, shared spaces. That touch is really intentional, that the sharing of sexual energy is very minimal and frankly, like very intentional, that there might be couples that emerge, but that this is not just a free-for-all, that there is a collective commitment to not just shared values, but to spiritual practice. That if you're here, it's because you are really embracing yourself as on a spiritual journey and not in some sort of like vague way, but in a very dedicated and specific way. And that is deeply resonant for me. And it's got to feel organic. I've seen so many times where people like are try to force themselves into communities because they've had a shared interest, but it actually doesn't feel organic. And one of the things I've really valued here is a sense of organicity and of authenticity. Of like, oh yeah, we actually all really like each other and we enjoy spending time with each other. We don't need to create some giant event, and we also don't need to all be doing the same thing that we're all into in order to spend time deepening. The last thing I'll say is this, again, I want to emphasize that depth. When we first got together and we started talking about producing events, we realized that what we needed was simply to deepen with each other. Adrienne Maree Brown talks about this. You move at the speed of trust. You don't move at the speed of capitalism. You don't move at the speed of like getting stuff done for funders or whatever. You move at, or even at your own ambitions. You move at the speed at which we can all feel an authentic trust of each other. And that's slower.
So Mischa, you're white. You're a white man, and you're the white man in like the primarily BIPOC space. I know you're also often like the Jewish guy at like the pro-Palestine space. Mm-hmm. And you didn't grow up in a particularly diverse community. You didn't necessarily like grow up in that. So what's that been like for you? Like, what's that journey of being yourself, you know, in these spaces? And I know a lot of white folks that I know, they're like, how do I be in community with people who are different than me? Like, I've never had that experience. Like, what have you learned in that journey of being often the only one who looks like you in these spaces?
Before the cameras were rolling, we talked about how raising race was like awkward. I was like, oh, it's awkward. He's the white guy in the room. And I said, no, it's not. And that's part of the key. I think that's such an important thing. If raising race in a space as a white man, hearing that someone is raising race makes me awkward, that's right away going to create a lot of distance between me and people of color. If people of color can't like have a story about me or have a perception about me that he can't just hang, that he's got to like either work really hard to convince Black people that he's like one of the good ones, or he's got to work really, really hard to like overcome the guilt or the shame, or on the opposite side gets really reactive at the very naming of race, you know, insists on colorblindness and like pretends that it's not there. If we like go like either way, I feel like it's just not the way I envisioned white people really wanting to be. It's certainly not the way I want to be. Being able to be relaxed, talk about race in the same way we talk about gender, we talk about religions. Like, there are differences. Let's talk about them. It doesn't mean anything. You want to raise the fact that I'm a white man? Yep, that's true. We're going to talk about the privilege that brings in. I like to think that I'm at least moderately conversant in those privilege dynamics and that I can see them. I can own when I fuck it up, but not make it like a giant imposition of guilt and then forcing the people around me to have to hold me in my guilt and shame, which is just also so fucked up. And another way of pedestalizing and objectifying other people, just all of that. But I was raised in a lot of privilege and in primarily white spaces, prep schools, Ivy League and all that. And I did have to do very concrete anti-racist work for my own soul's journey. And I'm blessed that my anti-racist mentor, the Reverend Bridge Feltis, based in Los Angeles, the Intersection for Mankind, really helped inculcate in me a understanding that my any kind of white guilt was not really welcome. That was not what was being sought by the collective woke movement. That like it was actually an indulgence. That it was very self-centered and oriented me to my own re-indigenization into an understanding of myself as having been oppressed by whiteness, in the sense of like a narrative that made me think of my own superiority, made me orient to superiority, made me lose my connection to my own indigeneity and to my own ancestral resources. And that gave me a discourse around power and privilege that was not shaming, but that was real and allowed me to be conversant in it.
No, I love it because, basically what you're saying is that being human makes us equal. And like what racism tries to do is to remove the equal. And so once that is done, it's dehumanized all parties involved. Absolutely. Right? And I think that's just really what you're talking about. It's like, you're just being human. Like, yeah, race, like this is a thing. We have these ancestral traumas. Like we're going to talk about it, like all these other things. So I love what you're saying about like being yourself, being authentic, being a human, right, is really the remedy, I feel like, in so many ways. Because that doesn't mean you don't need to do the learning, because thank God for that, right? We need to do that, but I really appreciate that. Thank you. So something, Mischa, that I think both of us have in common is that we have friends and family who are very diverse, not just racially, not just spiritually, but in what they believe, right? We're in a very divided time in America, and I appreciate about you is that you maintain relationships with people that you disagree with. You're able to like sit in the dissonance of like, yeah, we have a different feeling about the Palestine conflict, what's happening in the Holy Land, and like a lot of your family are on one side and you're here on this side, and you're educating and you're sitting in that fire. And so I just love to hear from you, like what allows you and what makes you able to, because so many of the people I know just can't even talk to their family who they disagree with about something, or they can't even be in real, like, I need to cut you out because you don't see it the way that I see it. And I mean, how are we going to heal, right? So how do you stay in relationship with people that you disagree with?
Yeah, thanks for that question. There's a few things. As the more Jewish I've become, the more anti-Zionist I have become, and that has been a deeply, deeply profound part of my spiritual awakening, is to come to a much more articulated place of opposition to a huge amount of what Judaism represents in the world, sociopolitically, and even culturally, and that very much puts me in opposition to the vast majority of the Jewish world. And so I'll just name that. A lot of how I stay connected in having these challenging conversations, especially with fellow Jews, is first to orient like primarily to love. I'll literally have a conversation with two Jewish men, for instance, who I know have like differing values and opinions on Zionism and the state of Israel. And I'll just say, nothing that we're going to talk about this if you're open to it, and nothing that you can say will make me love you less. And I'll just say that out loud, because I know that they are probably coming from a place of like, is Mischa going to jump down our throats? Is Mischa going to like use our positions against us to also dehumanize, to accuse us of not caring about others' lives, right? To say you're monsters, which I do not do, but that's the context. If we're going to enter into these conversations, is immediate risk of dehumanization. So I try to head that off at the pass. I also tend to speak a lot from my own experience. I tend to not make, and this is maybe, I think there's better activists out there than I am. I don't think that this is actually my biggest strong suit, but when I do talk about this, I talk about it from my own sense of morality. There's a great Aramaic concept called svara, which is moral intuition that transcends even Talmudic wisdom or even following what's written in the Torah. This knowing of what is right, that's in our hearts, that's God-given. And I appeal to that. I also, in these conversations, appeal to not side arguments, but in inquiries into where we are losing our souls. Like where we're losing the parts of us that matter to us. Like what is it doing to us to have a narrative of our own victimization as Jews that allows us to distance from our own capacity to harm? And I try to access, just like I do in men's work, in men's liberation work, how I was taught to do in white liberation work, to say, what are we losing as Jews how are we dehumanizing ourselves in this conflict, and how can we try to reach for a regaining of humanity, not as some sociopolitical favor. And I need to stay regulated. It's not always easy. And I really want to be truthful that I have lost some friends here. I have lost some relationships, not necessarily giant blow-ups, but just in, oh, okay, for the next year after October 7th, we're not going to be able to talk. We can't find a place to connect from love. I'm blessed, actually, that that hasn't happened in my nuclear family.
So something, Mischa, that I think both of us have in common is that we have friends and family who are very diverse, not just racially, not just spiritually, but in what they believe, right? We're in a very divided time in America, and I appreciate about you is that you maintain relationships with people that you disagree with. You're able to like sit in the dissonance of like, yeah, we have a different feeling about the Palestine conflict, you know, what's happening in the Holy Land, and like a lot of your family are on one side and you're here on this side, and you're educating and you're sitting in that fire. And so I just love to hear from you, like what allows you and what makes you able to, because so many of the people I know just can't even talk to their family who they disagree with about something, or they can't even be in like, I need to cut you out because you don't see it the way that I see it. And I mean, how are we going to heal, right? So how do you stay in relationship with people that you disagree with?
Thanks for that question. There's a few things. As the more Jewish I've become, the more anti-Zionist I have become, and that has been a deeply, deeply profound part of my spiritual awakening, is to come to a much more articulated place of opposition to a huge amount of what Judaism represents in the world, sociopolitically, and even culturally, and that very much puts me in opposition to the vast majority of the Jewish world. And so I'll just name that. A lot of how I stay connected in having these challenging conversations, especially with fellow Jews, is first to orient like primarily to love. I'll literally have a conversation with two Jewish men, for instance, who I know have like differing values and opinions on Zionism and the state of Israel. And I'll just say, nothing that we're going to talk about this if you're open to it, and nothing that you can say will make me love you less. And I'll just say that out loud, because I know that they are probably coming from a place of like, is Mischa going to jump down our throats? Is Mischa going to like use our positions against us to also dehumanize, to accuse us of not caring about others' lives, right? To say you're monsters, which I do not do, but that's the context. If we're going to enter into these conversations, is immediate risk of dehumanization. So I try to head that off at the pass. I also tend to speak a lot from my own experience. I tend to not make, and this is maybe, I think there's better activists out there than I am. I don't think that this is actually my biggest strong suit, but when I do talk about this, I talk about it from my own sense of morality. There's a great Aramaic concept called svara, which is moral intuition that transcends even Talmudic wisdom or even following what's written in the Torah. This knowing of what is right, that's in our hearts, that's God-given. And I appeal to that. I also, in these conversations, appeal to not side arguments, but in inquiries into where we are losing our souls. You know, like where we're losing the parts of us that matter to us. Like what is it doing to us to have a narrative of our own victimization as Jews that allows us to distance from our own capacity to harm? I try to access, just like I do in men's work, in men's liberation work, how I was taught to do in white liberation work, to say, what are we losing as Jews? How are we dehumanizing ourselves in this conflict, and how can we try to reach for a regaining of humanity, not as some sociopolitical favor? And I need to stay regulated. It's not always easy. And I really want to be truthful that I have lost some friends here. I have lost some relationships, not necessarily giant blow-ups, but just in, oh, okay, for the next year after October 7th, we're not going to be able to talk. We can't find a place to connect from love. I'm blessed, actually, that hasn't happened in my nuclear family.
So, Mischa, we've talked about men, about leaders needing, the accountability and bringing the joy into it. And I think another thing that can be hard for leaders, for men, to do is receive, right? We can just be in go mode, got to execute, got to be accountable, got to be in integrity all the time. And I know that that's a journey you've been on yourself, so have I. And there's a moment, that I know happened for you with a birthday party where you got to really receive from the community. So
let's talk about it. Yeah. Birthdays are so fraught for me. I grew up with so much privilege and so much love. And the idea of being like, hey, everybody, like, look at me. I am like the trust fund white guy who also wants to be celebrated was just so hard. It was just so, I was like, this is such anathema to my values to like ask people to celebrate me. And and that, I really feel like I had a transformative moment thanks to the Embrace community where I mentioned that it was my birthday. I didn't even mention that it was my birthday. Someone else had to mention to Lotus and a few other people in the Embrace community that it was my birthday coming up. And Lotus looked at me like I had betrayed her by not telling her, And I really got this download of like, oh, like it's actually important to these people to celebrate me, that this is not just okay, but that it's actually a little insulting not to. So I had this moment where members of the Embrace community basically insisted that I do something for my birthday. And this was really still edgy for me. And I gathered some people and put out the call, and the friends that I've made in a more spiritual context really insisted on creating ritual for me, which is exactly what I actually wanted. It allowed me to tap into what I actually wanted. Like I did want to be celebrated. I did want a ritual. I did want a love shower. I did want affirmations. It's even now it's still a little edgy to say. And it was transformative because of the joy with which it was offered. That it was like, this is a joy to offer this to you. You are not just the privileged white guy that we hold at a distance, that we embrace. I mean it, but we embrace you. That you. It is exciting to celebrate you. There is a amazing statement that Dr. Cedar Barstow, who founded the Right Use of Power Institute, she says that self-care for leaders is an ethical and moral imperative. That if you're not taking care of yourself, you're not cleared to lead. And that's maybe a little bit harsher than she meant it. That's my own interpretation, but in many ways, it's really true. And I know that I'm really not cleared to coach and not cleared in integrity to lead if I'm not doing my own practices, if I'm not taking care of my body, and we bring it. We bring this kind of like, here's where I'm falling down on my self-care to men's group and to each other as brothers and friends, and no shame, but still remembering that this is not just a nice to have. And it's such a challenge still, but boy, that was a really transformative moment. I allowed it to be a moment that got me over that story, and it really was, and it was a deep story. I'm 43. It's been a story my whole life.